Hello and welcome to the Sea of Startups, where we dive into the stories behind the startups in Southeast Asia. I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin, Managing Partner of Indelible Ventures. Now, if you're a founder or funder looking to learn more about what drives the startups in Southeast Asia, this podcast is for you. We're about to sit down with founders to uncover the unique insights into the origins and motivations behind launching their startups. We'll uncover the stories behind the struggles, the ups, the downs, guided from the view of an entrepreneur. So, without any further ado, let's jump into today's show. All right. I am very happy today because my guest is Jes Min Lua, the co-founder of Recommend Group. For those of you who don't know, Recommend Group is Southeast Asia's #1 home and local services platform, operating under the brands Sajasa.com in Indonesia and Recommend.my in Malaysia. Thank you very much for being here, Jasmine.
Oh, you're welcome. Hi, Kevin. So honored to be on this platform.
Very cool. Very cool. So one of the questions that I ask every single founder that I ever meet is taking back to the origin story. So tell me, what got you onto the entrepreneurial journey?
What got me on? So if you know my background, I spent the first part of my career as a consultant. So I spent some time in Accenture, and then I went to Bain and spent some years there as well. And I guess along the way, I learned a lot of things about strategy, running businesses, business models, and expansion as well. So around maybe like 2014, I suddenly started to think, wouldn't it be interesting if some of these skills, so-called skills that I have, is put to solving problems that I personally really, really care about. At the time, I was completing an MBA. I also spent some time in East Africa. And what really struck me in the entire experience was that, oh, wow, there's like a whole world outside of consulting I was not aware about. And spending some time in Africa, I realized that business and funding investments, they can do a lot in terms of trying to improve the standard of living of poor communities. And that was something I was very passionate about. So after my MBA, came back to Bain, did a couple more years, and then decided that now was the time for me to start doing my own thing. So that's how I got into entrepreneurship. And I suppose around the same time, my dad and I was doing up the family home. And it was a process that was probably one of the most stressful in life. People say that renovations and constructing your own home, building your own home could be one of the things that you find the most stressful. And it is true. And it is because, you are spending a huge sum of money, right? A large chunk of your savings. You are dealing with content, you're dealing with things that you are not aware of. And basically everybody who's involved in the process is incentivized to make the project as big and complicated and taking as much time as they can possibly convince you to do. So then I realized that, oh, wow, this market, this home services industry is so fragmented. It's so, you don't know who's a good one, who is a bad one, who is highly rated, who is likely to run away with your money. And so the seeds of the idea came out, right? What if we built a platform, a trust platform that gave people transparency into who was a good one, who was not a good one, and who is likely to be trusted? What if the platform even built that trust layer and, and allowed people to buy this sort of services online, right? Just like you would a Philips kettle or similar. And it is at that time as well that I met Alex, who's my co-founder, who's based in Singapore, as well as Anthony, another co-founder who was based in Indonesia. And we sat down and said, let's hack it out. Let's see whether we can build something that essentially allows people to hire services with a peace of mind, build a platform of trust that allow them to transact, and see where we go from there. So that's how we set this up.
Very cool. Very cool. You got your co-founder split across the three main countries that you got the trifecta going. So I'm curious that there's a word that you said a couple of times that I really want to highlight onto, which is trust. And so when you're looking at the home services market, tell me the level of importance in trust. I mean, you highlighted it a couple of times, but when you're attacking it from a business standpoint to try and solve that problem, how do you approach it?
Got it. So there's a few angles that we think about trust. The first one is establishing enough trust for someone to even book you in the first place. So for example, when you first get to know a service professional, either you meet that person online or, was recommended by a cousin of a cousin, you first need to ensure that that person has a certain level of standing, a certain amount of experience, that person knows how to do your job and is unlikely to completely screw it up, right? So that's the first thing. And then the second one, you need to know that the incentives must be in place for that person to do a good job, and then not run away with half your money, right? So that's the second part of it. And the third one, if something really goes wrong, what incentive does that person have to come back and fix the problem? A lot of times when we are hiring services, it's only a one time. I mean, people don't build, a home like 3 or 4 times in their life. It's probably the 1 or 2 times that they build a home. So if you hire someone and if someone screws up and runs away, there's really nothing you can do. It's not like you can, hunt him down, or it's not like you can ruin his business. He can just start up another business, right? And so when we thought about how do you create a platform that first creates transparency around who is a good one in your area, right? So if, for example, you live in Bangsa, who are the service professionals that Bangsarians kind of like? And why that is important? Because the average person in Bangsa is very different from the average person in Mont Kiara, Petaling Jaya, or all of these areas, and they have their quirks and eccentricities as well. So service professionals who are familiar with homes in Bangsa, condos in Bangsa, layout of condos in Bangsa, layout of pipes behind walls in condos in Bangsa, these matters, right? So that is one aspect of it. Who is an expert in your area, who has been rated well, who is actively picking up jobs, and who is likely to complete your job with the maximum amount of quality and the, I guess you could say, minimum or the best value for your money.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how we think about it. So on one hand, there is that discovery of who is the best person. And then the platform also provides assurances as well. So if you hire a service professional through our platform and the person screws up, there is a recourse, because in a way, a lot of that person's or that service professional's business comes from us. So he would be very much incentivized to fix that problem and get his reviews up again, because otherwise he loses all the revenue stream coming from our platform. But if you hire someone outside the platform and then, you get angry with him, what makes you think he will come back? He will just say, forget Kevin. He's just one guy. I'll just go and look for another one, right? Whereas if they are part of Recommend, they'll be like, I'm going to lose all these revenue streams, lots of other customers. So they are more incentivized to do that. The platform itself provides protection as well. So we have an insurance and we have a warranty as well for every single job that gets transacted over our platform. So in a way, there is sort of like 3 levels of protection and trust when you order a service through us rather than the recommendation of a cousin or a cousin.
Okay. And so the last aspect that you said there was that you have an insurance on it. So there's some sort of policy that's included into the price of services as it's transacted on the platform, yeah?
Yes, that's right. So whether you hire a cleaning service, a plumbing service, or a renovation to do up your house from the foundation level, we collaborate with Allianz to provide an insurance against theft, damages, and public liability as well. So that forms at least the base level of protection. And then on top of that, we have services that provide a warranty. If anything happens within a specific amount of time after the service is complete, or if your problem reoccurs again, then the team actually helps you resolve it. So that's the other level. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. And so it's Allianz in all of the country, all of the markets that you operate. It's the same insurance partner that's doing it. And are they also doing the warranty side of it, or is that something that you guys underwrite yourself?
The warranty side we underwrite ourselves
Okay.
with our service professionals. And if some reason they cannot solve the problem, then we send somebody back on our own costs. As for Allianz, yes, it's the same partner in both countries. They have been an amazing partner actually.
Okay, so take me back because I always wonder, you know, when you look at a company evolve over time, there's always like a growing pains process that comes from it. So when you look back at onboarding service providers onto the platform in the earliest of days, how did you go about kind of that step one, step two of getting people on platform? And then I guess the flip side of it is also on the customer side, because you're kind of balancing, you know, supply and demand to an extent. Yeah.
Well, the good thing about our business is, I think the demand is always there, and the problem is known by pretty much anyone who has had responsibility to do up or maintain their own homes. So from the customer standpoint, you know, everybody always says, yeah, it's hard to find, XXX service. So from that perspective, we did not have issues. What was slightly harder at the beginning is to find good service professionals and convince them to work with us. Because the good service professionals are probably people who have been in the market for 20, 30 years. They know, they have their own customer base as well. And in a way, they don't have such a need for new customers. Whereas the newer service professionals, they are not so established, not so experienced. And it is them that needs the more work and more development, right, in order to get them to that level. So what we did was this, we got a whole bunch of people on our social media and all that. And we told them, if you send us a recommendation for one good service professional that you have used before and that you will stand by, his quality, we will then compile it across the whole of KL, Klang Valley, and provide you a whole list of recommended service professionals for your area, right? And that way we got a few hundred service professionals already to start with. And then we started calling them, explaining what we are about, and kind of like onboarding them onto the platform.
Mm-hmm.
In the early days, where Shopee wasn't big, even Grab wasn't super big at the time. It's harder to convince people to come on board. But if you look at it today, we almost have service professionals signing up in our platform on a daily basis without any advertisements or whatever. So getting good service professionals is a matter of where do they come from, right? Do they come from forums? Do they come from social media? How do we filter them to make sure that only the good quality ones get through? And then subsequently, how do we train them, either from a customer service perspective or even to some degree a technical perspective? And then when they first hit the market, we measure the customer feedback and we give them tips and tricks of how to build their business. So it's that process that we have kind of like built over the years.
So tips and tricks to build the business on your platform, is it?
Yes, we do. They are, based on our data and the behaviors that we observe, we know that certain types of behavior, sits well with customers. So for example, responding really quickly, telling customers, this is my estimated price upfront, telling them like what time will I come and really turning up on time, that sort of thing. Really sits well with them. So we give them this sort of data so that they can measure themselves as well as their team members, and they know what it takes to be successful.
Yeah, a bit of quality customer service, it sounds like, goes a long way to building up a book of business. Yeah,
absolutely. And because it's a person-to-person business as well, the definition of service level changes. So for example, if it was me who requested a service, I would like the guy to come on time. I open the door, you go in, fix the thing, and go out the door without even talking to me because I'm very busy. So that's my definition of customer service. You get the thing done, I don't need to see you, and the payment just gets done, right? For other people, their definition of service would be, good morning, so-and-so, I'm here to do your house. How are you here? How are you today? Would you like me to do the bedroom first or the living room first? And have that banter and that connection. For me, I'll be like, just get it done. So understanding that about the customer also helps.
Okay. What are the top categories for these types of services that get transacted on your platform, and has that evolved as you've grown?
Our categories on the platform that we are very strong at is split into two categories, sort of like two communities, we call them. The first one is home improvement. So you'll be looking at things like renovations, interior design, carpentry, ceiling, tiling, that sort of thing in home improvement. And then in home maintenance and cleaning, we have things like daily cleaning, sofa mattress cleaning, carpet cleaning, electrician, plumbing, air condition servicing, that that sort of things in the other category. So these are the two sort of like areas in which we have been strong even right from the start and continue to be probably the strongest platform around.
Okay. And what's the level of recurrence? So when you look at the customers, and not necessarily the service providers, but when you see the customers coming onto the platform, what's the level of recurrence? Because I think you referenced before, you're not remodeling your house every year, every day. What's the level of recurrence? And does that cause a challenge of constantly having to onboard the demand side?
That's a great question, actually. So when it comes to home maintenance, there are some categories where the recurrence is on a weekly basis. So things like cleaning, is on a weekly basis. And then things like aircon servicing is on a 3-monthly kind of basis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So for those, there's a natural recurrence in terms of the type of service. And then when you look at home improvement, actually, I was looking at the data today, and there are people who use us like 14, 15, 16 times. And I thought they were things like cleaning, but turns out that when you do a renovation, you don't just look for a renovation contractor. You look for a renovation contractor, and then you look for a tiling guy, then you look for a grill guy, and then after, when it's time to move in, you look for a mover and cleaner. And so in both home improvement and home maintenance, there is a fair bit of recurrence as well.
Okay, so when the one big question that I have, this is a generic one that comes across for most platforms, because when there's some sort of level of human interaction in the provision of a service or in the occurrence of a transaction, oftentimes there's a challenge of leakage, because if I go face to face with an individual, how do you confront the challenge of that just not becoming a direct relationship as opposed to a platform relationship continuing on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge in this business model itself. We used to have a bigger problem with this, when we first started, and people didn't really understand the value of dealing with the platform. But today, I have to say that problem is a lot less than before, right? We can see our retention actually going up every single. And the reason is because people realize that these service professionals, they are quite transitionary. Is that the right word?
Transitory, transitionary, yeah, something like that.
Well, essentially here today, gone tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
And when you have an industry that is very much powered by foreign labor as well, you find a good one, and the next day he's back in his village again. So people find that it's hard to hang on to the service professionals. They may be good today, but next month when you order him, he might send a friend or a worker, and he might not be good anymore. So in a way, there are no good service professionals, I think. There are service professionals who are incentivized to serve a customer well because he is being measured and tracked on a platform, but there's no essentially good service professional and no essentially bad service professionals. So the platform actually plays a role to make sure that he is on his best behavior every time you order, right? So that's the first thing. The sort of like consistency of quality, and it doesn't matter who comes to your house, your job will get done. The second one is transparency of pricing. So if you get someone to come to your house, I mean, you're kind of committed already. The guy is already standing there looking at your capacitor. You will essentially take any price he says. He can say it costs $200, you will pay it. If he says it costs $450, you will pay it as well, right? So what we do on the platform is to provide transparency of pricing. So in some categories like aircon, cleaning categories, we can tell you, okay, this is going to be $25 per hour, for example. And in some other categories where you require a few quotations to make sure that you are getting the best value, you get these quotations in a matter of hours rather than waiting for 3 different guys to come and view your problem, right? And quote you. So on the platform, it is so much faster to be able to get prices and then say, okay, I can afford to do this and I'm going to do this.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And then if things go wrong, you have warranty, you have insurance to back you up. And I guess the fourth reason is you get to pay using your e-wallet, right? And get some more points and Grab rewards.
Yeah. I am personally points obsessive across all different areas in which I can earn them. Whether I use them is a different story, but accumulating them I love.
Yes, it's like, sometimes in life you don't really know what's going to be a success or failure, but yeah, I got 10 points.
Absolutely. So on the aspect of the recurring sorts of types of services, are you able to nudge the actual end users, the actual consumers, in order to say, hey, it's been 90 days since your last aircon servicing. Check out our service providers. This is the one that you used last time.
Yes. So we do that. In all the categories that we have detected have recurrence, the system automatically sends out push notifications, email, SMSs, for example, to say, hey, it's been a long time since we've met you. Your aircon is probably blowing warm air again. Please come back and choose us. And if you prefer to use the same service professional you have, the system then asks you, hey, do you prefer this guy, or will you want to swipe left, right? Swipe left, and get another better one. So yeah, the system does that automatically, which is brilliant because no aircon guy is going to sit down and say, who did I service 3 months ago? Maybe I should message the person, right? He's busy doing the stuff.
Yeah,
so if the system does it for him, he gets recurrence without needing to sit down and think about it. So I think that works well on both sides.
Yeah, certainly good on both sides. I mean, I can't imagine most the servicemen, they're mostly transacting on WhatsApp and so forth. There's not necessarily a calendar with booking reminders and push notifications and all these things to kind of make their life easier, while also making the life easier on the consumer as well.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you on the side of the service providers, when you're looking at them, you talked about your experience when you went to East Africa. You talked about some of these aspects of looking at how you can drive real impact. Can you talk a little bit about how, there's a lot of conversation around how, platforms for gig work, and I mean, I'm not trying to lump this into the category of gig work per se, but as far as being able to connect service providers and provide tools for them to operate more efficiently and smoothly, is there any way for you to actually look at it and say before and after, here's the impact that we've had on these service providers?
Absolutely. So one story I like to tell very much is in Indonesia, where we have literally, I don't know whether you've seen it, or you've experienced it, but basically there are big houses which are divided into 16 or 20 tiny little homes, so that many people can share it. So there was one time, we were looking through our service professionals and we found a couple of profiles which we thought, these guys must be scamming us or coming from a competitor, right? Why do they all provide aircon service, and why do they all live in the same home, right? That's so strange. And so we sent someone there and we realized that there are whole homes that contains 16 or 20 men from one village near Jakarta. And they basically come to the city because they can make money from our platform. So one guy comes and then he calls his cousin and his bros, and very soon the entire house is filled with men from one city doing one service. Very odd, but it is a very clear indicator that using a platform like ours, they have found employment where they never had employment before. And this sounds kind of corny, but where else can you get an evidence of providing people real jobs? And these guys found it worthy to move from their villages to Jakarta so that they can earn money and they can send the money back to their families, right? Send their children to school and clothe them and all that. So we really like that. So that was one example that I always talk about. The other example was at the beginning of the pandemic, when the governments all went nuts, right? And they were like, we're dealing with this virus, we have no idea, but let's shut everybody down. And, we don't know what is essential, what is not, but let's just shut everybody down. And then what happened was that people didn't realize that aircon servicing, electrical, plumbing, all these are fairly essential services, right? Especially if you're running data centers and your electricity goes out, it's fairly urgent to get it up and running again. So, the police, the government authorities, they didn't have clear instructions or permission for these guys to go around. And so suddenly we had a surge in demand when everybody was overusing their fridges and air conditions and washing machines, and they needed service. And these service professionals got stuck at every roadblock you could imagine. And we realized wow, there is really no champion for the service industry. The taxi or the ride-hailing industry has a champion because they're big enough. And then the food delivery guys, they have champions as well. But for service industry, because they're so fragmented, nobody cared about these guys, and that they were all basically stuck. So we took it upon ourselves to, call the authorities, call the police station, call them at the roadblocks, and try to like bail them out from whatever lockups they were, they found themselves in. So that was the role that we found ourselves in during the pandemic, and that was really, really interesting. So that's basically on the home maintenance, essential type of services. Because of us, they continued running, and they could sustain life during that period, right? It was madness, but it was very fulfilling. And at the same time, there were so many people who lost their jobs for good. There were some, shipping guys, lost their jobs for good. Teachers who obviously, did not find many students to teach physically anymore. They all switched careers. And when they switched careers to do something that they perhaps were not so established in, the platform was the first place they went to in order to start building their reputation. And I've got, this story of this guy who used to be a teacher, lost his job during the pandemic, the start of the lockdowns. And today he is one of the most successful renovation contractors on our platform, the one of the highest performing ones as well. So we really did help people stay online, stay alive, and transform themselves during the pandemic. And that, I think, is worth something.
And have you, when talking about Indonesia, are you primarily Jakarta, or have you expanded into other cities as well?
We covered Jabo, which is Jakarta, and the 4 or 5 cities around it. And we also cover most of the tier 1 cities, actually.
So like Surabaya,
Surabaya, Bali, Bandung,
Okay.
Medan, all the majors, even as far as like Makassar.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So you're in Sulawesi as well, yeah?
We are in Sulawesi, and apparently we are very big there because I've been told, I've never been there, but it's a coastal town, so extremely humid, and air conditions are everybody's best friend. So
I think in this part of the world in general, aircon servicemen are one of the highest in demand people every 3 months.
I know, it's like, the feeling when you enter an air-conditioned room, wow, like, you cannot explain it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So let me transition and start talking about like a looking forward basis. So what's next for the platform? So like when you look ahead, how do you define success? What is your measuring stick by which you would say 12 months from now, or if you want to go longer term and work backwards from like a 5-year vision, what defines success for you as either as a platform or as an organization?
Got it. So what defines success for us, and what is our North Star metric, is really number of jobs transacted or successful of the platform. So we don't want to be just a platform where people came and discovered the best service professionals. We want to be able to build enough trust, guide them through the funnel, and help them make that purchase decision. So that transaction, or the fact that the job is successfully closed, is very important for us. At the same time, we monetize from that. So the service professionals, they earn when a job is closed, right? So this metric actually guides or aligns the customer incentive, aligns the service professionals' definition of success, and also our shareholders and our stakeholders as well, right? So using that as a metric, number of jobs transacted, that's our North Star. And we want to be the platform that transacts the most jobs in Southeast Asia. So that's basically our
across all categories, or within your vertical, as far as the most transactions.
We are still very much a home and local services platform. So in home maintenance and in home improvement, it is pretty much the same metric. Having said that, there is strong drive within our team to add to the number of categories or communities that we have. So, we have plans to launch new categories every couple of months.
Okay. And can I ask whether or not further geographical expansion is on the cards for you?
Yeah, certainly, but I can't tell you, otherwise I'll have to kill you. Southeast Asia is a very interesting space, very fragmented space. Fragmented bunch of countries, right? United by their love of food, pretty much. But
that is a universal.
That's the universal, right? So we definitely intend to move out. I think the concept that we have, right, essentially home services or a facilities platform that can serve any sort of service, but without necessarily needing to hire people for every single category or every single town or city that we're in, that has a very big role to play in the coming years.
Okay. Okay. So when looking at this definition of success, when you need to look at the activities or the specific decision areas that you need to act upon, can you boil things down to say one or two specific areas that you must get absolutely right if you are going to maximize your odds of hitting that goal?
Absolutely. I think on the customer side, well, the one thing, the one concept or the one rule that underpins all of this is we must create value on the customer and the service professional side. And to a large degree, I think we have, right? But what I mentioned earlier about the challenge of this model, which is the retention side, is one we absolutely need to get right. And on the customer side, it's a question of what does it take to get the customer to, even when they found the plumber of their dreams, still come back to our platform and order the plumber through our platform. And how does this behavior then incentivize the plumber to tell the customer, hey, I like you and all, but can you book me through the platform so that I can manage my schedule, manage my time, and maybe get more rewards through the platform rather than doing all these things manually and, have my business be a mess. I think essentially that's the flow that we have to refine. We already have things in place, and like I mentioned, every single year we find that retention has improved, but I think we have got some distance to go.
Okay. Okay. That's awesome. And as we said, retention is always the big challenge, because when you have face-to-face contact, there's a human inevitability. Maybe for the specific types of ones that like the customer service of good morning, the long drawn out conversations, all of that, they're exchanging WhatsApps and whatever. But certainly a challenge. So you're basically building out some additional services and tools in order to drive the stickiness. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes. So essentially the platform, 80% of our time is trying to figure out how technology can be used to align the incentives. So customer coming in is guided towards making a transaction, and service professionals, how to guide the right service professional with the right rating, right location, right expertise to pick up the right jobs and make sure he behaves as well. So technology makes both parties behave. Everyone is happy.
Very cool. Very cool. So let me transition and wrap up with the standard closing questions that I ask everyone. So the first one is, what is the tech tool that you just can't live without?
Yeah, you're gonna kill me, but I'm gonna say WhatsApp, because I think it's the one thing that has made truly the world closer together. And it probably does not have as many psychological negative effects as social media has had in our lives.
Yeah,
So
I think
yeah,
yeah, every single listener that is in Southeast Asia is probably nodding yes, because they live on WhatsApp. Most of my US friends that are listening, you probably are not as heavy of a user of WhatsApp, unfortunately for you. Unfortunately, I got to convince some of my US friends to download WhatsApp and to be able to keep in contact with me. It's crazy. Outside of there, rest of the world, on board. But yeah.
What do they use? Carrier pigeons or?
Exactly my point. You have my argument down to a T. Cool. Second question of this closing question is, if you were to talk to another startup founder that's just getting started, what is the biggest piece of advice that you would offer?
Gosh, I think, the biggest piece of advice I would offer is don't simply take advice. And the reason is because, everybody views their own life from the perspective of their history, what they've gone through, what fears they've had, what successes and failures they've had. And it's very possible that the person you're talking to is coming from a completely different perspective and values different things in life as well. So be very, very careful who you take advice from. I know of startup founders who took advice from VCs when they first started, and they probably wish they'd been more discerning about who they listen to. Some of them listen to some of their early customers, and customers are not always right? A lot of times customers don't know what they want, and they will lead you in all sorts of funny directions. So one piece of advice is, don't simply take advice from people.
Yeah,
And
yeah, or integrate it with some other frame of thinking. Just don't take the advice at face value. I think I've personally seen a number of companies take customer advice that can lead them down the wrong direction, because one customer may not be representative of the other 1,000 that you're trying to target. So if you go down one avenue, you could end up spending a lot of time.
no, I think what you're kind of alluding that is that you have to use feedback people give you, like anecdotal stories, or like my cousin's father said this, that kind of thing, to develop your hypothesis around what could be it, and then try to collect data that is unbiased as possible, even though it's very tough. Try to collect data as unbiased as possible from an unbiased pool, if possible, and at the most number of points that you can get. Right? And try to test whether this hypothesis is true. So for example, there was one time I was telling my team, like, oh, I don't like our landing pages. Our landing pages need to look like this. It needs to have a giant headline, very Twitter bootstrap 2.0, very Silicon Valley. I want to kind of look. And they keep telling me, like, Jasmine, customers don't like that. Customers don't like that. I said, how can? It's so nice and simple. And if they had any sense like I do, they will like the same thing. But what I have learned over the years is nobody is like me, and nobody likes things like I do. So whatever it is, when you have a hypothesis or sense of what is right, put it to the test, right? Design from you, design from somebody else, and try to be as unbiased as possible when you split or you A/B test it, and then learn things from there. So don't ask your customers, watch your customers and see what they do, right? Because very, very often they actually don't understand why they want certain things, and they cannot explain to you anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And when you talk about very experienced people giving advice as well, things don't always replicate. You can't just copy and paste what worked in one person's situation and then apply it to another situation. So there's always this level of caution as well that's needed when you're taking advice from either a VC or a very senior business mentor or whoever it may end up being, despite decades and decades of experience and all of that. Situations are unique. I always love the quote, I believe it's Mark Twain, history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So figuring out the rhyme, but not trying to say that it's the same.
Yeah, and I guess I was also reading this book, I can't remember what was it, I think Critical Thinking by Ralph Dobelli. And it kind of like tells the story of, when something makes sense, we try to go back and explain why it makes sense. Like, this company is doing well. Oh, that's because the industry was growing, because this guy was great, because he was amazing at attracting talent, and because he was very blah, 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 right? So they kind of make sense of it. But if you look at the failed stories, right? You look at the graveyard of like dead startups and, the defunct companies, you'll find that they also had a lot of these similar things, right? Like, great leadership that went nowhere and all that. So I think sometimes we overestimate our ability to influence things using like the 3-4 tools that we had. And we don't acknowledge that sometimes a lot of things are probably a little bit responsible for the eventual outcome, and you cannot influence them all. So
yeah. Oh, that's fantastic advice. On that, let's wrap things up. Jasmine, this has been really great conversation. There's a lot of lessons to be learned out of this conversation. For those that are listening that want to get in contact with you, how can they reach you?
Carrier pigeons would be more.
That's for the US people. Not on those that are not on WhatsApp, I should say.
LinkedIn is great.
LinkedIn is great. Perfect. Thank you very much, Jasmine. This has been fantastic.
You're welcome. Great. Okay. I'll catch up with you soon, Kevin. Take care. Okay.
All right, that wraps it up for another fantastic episode of the Sea of Startups. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Go onto iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review. It's the best way for us to get discovered and to have these startup stories reach a broader audience. If you have any suggestions or would like to get in touch, you can email me at kevin@indelible.vc. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Brocklin from Indelible Ventures, and this is the Sea of Startups.